Chapter 186, The Creeping Darkness. You may come in. The moment this deep voice echoed within the very dark room, and beyond, a door slowly creaked open. The intruder was a man with slick brown hair, with bright green eyes, and a very classy outfit: a black waistcoat on top of a formal shirt, black trousers, and a neat tie. All in all, this man in his early 30s was very handsome in every sense of the word. He was Alderd Winsley, broker for the Carrie Blanc Group. At least, that was what his identity demanded. "Greetings, father." He bowed his head the moment he came in and closed the door within the dark office. "Sit." Alderd obeyed instantly, moving past the comfortable couches that stood at the center of the room, but moved towards the chair in front of the man's desk. The man he called Father Lord Blanc of the Obsidian Council sat calmly behind his desk. His bright green gaze could pierce the eyes of anyone, and even though the office was dark, they glowed intensely. Alderd was used to this gaze, but even he still felt like prey being constantly watched by a predator. He sat in front of his father, separated only by the desk that stood between them. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then, "They're acting much faster than I expected. Things are getting really unstable right now." Lord Blanc spoke. He didn't have his usual confident and imposing tone. Instead, a sort of worrying vibe took over his voice, as well as his countenance. It was easy to see that he was shaken by the current situation. "How bad is it, father?" "Very bad. We can't contact our prime buyer due to some kind of interference through our main channel. We've also lost contact with the merchandise we kept in the warehouse in the east. Their prime buyer resided far from the capital, so the Carrie Blanc had gotten a vast patch of land where they constructed a massive warehouse to store the goods they would sell prior to the final sales. It was also a major part of their expansion plan. And now, it was in shambles. We are in a precarious state right now. If we do not complete that sale, then we'll encounter a devastating loss. Plus, the fact that we've lost contact with the warehouse and the merchandise. It worries me." Lord Blanc didn't want to admit it directly, but Alderd understood what all of this meant. The Carrie Blanc Group was desperate. They needed help. "Have you tried seeking assistance from the rest of your colleagues? You know, the ones that aren't on their side?" As Alderd asked this question, Lord Blanc grunted and shrugged slightly. "They're also like me, too busy protecting their interests to spare time for another." As Alderd heard this, he understood. No wise drowning man would try to save another drowning man if he didn't have some kind of life raft first. Lord Blanc had powerful connections, but since they were experiencing the same challenges as he was, they could not render their aid. Is this what they wanted all along, or? As Alderd whispered this, sensing his father's increasing frustration, he racked his brain to think of a solution. In the end, he could only imagine one. Sir Relix. We could enlist the help of Sir Relix, the dark adventurer who was shrouded in mystery and power. The same one who had reached the realm of absolute, and possessed a wealth of resources that would make the Carrie Blanc Group richer than ever before. He was immensely resourceful, intelligent, and most of all, overwhelmingly strong. There was none within the four walls of Carrie Blanc that didn't know who this esteemed man was. Sir Relix? Despite all of these qualities, Lord Blanc didn't seem to jump at the idea. He maintained a critical air around him as he narrowed his eyes in hesitation. "He had all the qualities we need, right? Besides, to turn the tables, we need as many powerful allies as we can." Alderd continued speaking, a slight passion in his voice. "I have seen Sir Relix's capabilities. He is a far better fighter than Yuri and a much better mage than I am. The fact that he was able to deliver so many monster cores also means he is still hiding much of his strength. It was difficult if not downright impossible to find even a single flaw in the man. I already know these things. I never doubted his capabilities in the slightest. Lord Blanc sighed. Once Aldert heard this, his face became twisted in confusion. If his father didn't doubt Sir Relic's capabilities, why did he show such hesitation? Then, I'm just unsure of whether he'd choose to ally with us. Someone as powerful and intelligent as him will not be fooled by tricks. I find it doubtful that we have enough to thoroughly convince him to take our side, given the current precarious situation we are in. Once Lord Blanc said this, Aldert finally understood his father's concerns. Sir Relix was too powerful to concern himself with the losing party's issues. The only reason they had maintained a somewhat mutual understanding was because the Carrie Blanc group could pull their own weight. Even then, they knew he couldn't be stopped even if he chose to break their promise. However, now that they were sinking, why would he choose to help? I believe he may come to our assistance. Aldert swallowed his saliva as he spoke. We just have to be convincing enough. As Lord Blanc heard this, he narrowed his gaze on his son and told him to proceed. He left his lover in our care, and we've taken proper care of her in his absence. I believe it takes some measure of trust in us for him to have done such a thing. He did that. Lord Blanc's eyes were wide open in surprise. Aldert was meant to inform him of every update about the man named Relix, but he could understand why this was never mentioned. It must have occurred during the period when the dragon incident occurred, and the capital began to tremble. In that case, there wouldn't be enough time or a stable opportunity to tell him. After all, after that entire incident, their enemies sporadically began to make their move. Lord Relix trusts us to an extent, father. Besides, he is not an unreasonable man. He has listened to my selfish requests a lot of times, and if we can make it worth his while, I'm sure he would hear us out at the very least. Upon hearing this, Lord Blanc sighed a little and maintained a few seconds of silence. Aldert held his breath as he watched his father for the decision he would make concerning the issue. I understand. Please arrange a meeting between me and Relix as soon as you can, he said, his bright eyes glinting with resolve. It is rumored that once Lord Blanc makes a decision, he sticks to it until the very end. The very expression that his father was making gave credence to those rumors. I shall inform you when next he comes to our establishment. Yes, father. Aldert bowed his head and smiled. The truth is, he wasn't very certain if Relix would actually help them, though he desperately hoped that was the case. There were some within the Carrie Blanc group who suspected that he was the one who defeated the dragon that appeared in the capital. Aldert was one of them. He truly believed that if anyone in the capital could achieve such a feat, it would be him. He just didn't know how and why, pretty much the circumstances surrounding the strange and mysterious event. You may leave now. Aldert obeyed his father's words and rose to his feet the instant he was told to depart. He took his bow once he reached the door, and finally, he Lord Blanc all alone in the room. The obsidian counselor heaved a heavy sigh and closed his eyes in the dark. I hope this all ends well. It would seem that the fate of the entire Carrie Blanc group, as well as that of the entire criminal underworld, rested on the choice of a single man. Sir Relix, please favor us. Asterisk. 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 This might end up being the darkest and most interesting adventure yet. As always, you might have to be a bit patient for the action, since a lot of setup had to be put in place. But this is gonna be a wild ride. Hope you all stick around for it. Also, character arts are on the app now, so please check them out and vote for your favorite characters. Thanks. Chapter 187, Silent Observations. A boy and a girl walked side by side as they entered a very luxurious sitting room, with doors plastered on multiple areas of the walls. The chandeliers that hung from the ceiling gave the room an air of prestige, and the freshly painted walls made it reminiscent of paradise. The ground was squally clean, covered in both squeaky clean tiles and carpets that were fluffy to the feet. Everything was pristine, an epitome of perfection. However, neither the boy nor the girl paid any of these fine details any attention. They were used to it, after all. Haha. For real. Yes. You really need to check it out. Well, since you ask so nicely. Haha. Of course. They both chuckled as they ventured further into the room, until they couldn't advance any further. After all, they had separate rooms to enter. I guess this is where we part ways, huh? The boy with black hair and an average height looked at the slightly taller girl beside him. He had a plain, ordinary face that you could find just about anywhere. His brown eyes appeared ordinary as well, and he looked unassuming enough to be seen as a harmless person. Just an ordinary guy, really. Yup. It's getting pretty late, so I'm gonna turn in now. The girl who responded was someone who could be said to be the exact opposite of the boy. She was absolutely stunning from head to toe. Her long brown hair was enchanting, and her amber eyes were captivating. Her slender physique, with perfect proportions, made her the kind of girl who would qualify as any guy's dream girl. It was surprising enough that she was talking to the boy in front of her so casually, but she actually seemed so immersed in the conversation that you'd think they were best friends. These two were Alicia and Ray, and after spending all day in the library, they were finally in their residence. Not only did they go there almost immediately after Grandmaster Conrad's announcements, but they didn't leave until now. It was already past 11 p.m., and the two teenagers seemed to have enough energy to keep going. If not for the tiny strand of self-control left in them, they could have continued into the next day. All right, Alicia. Guess I'll see you tomorrow. Yup. Good night, Ray. Alicia went into her room, and Ray did the same, almost doing so at exactly the same time. They both noticed this and giggled as they shut the door to their rooms. The moment Ray entered his room, a clicking sound echoed, which signified it being locked. The room brightened up thanks to the luminous stones that were automatically turned on using magic anytime they detected his presence. He could always turn them off manually, though. Hey. Ray looked at his room, realizing this was the first time in a few days since he actually spent time in it. I was gone for 2 days and none of them were even worried. Apparently, the reason they weren't too concerned was because Relix assured them that he would be safe, and that he could always detect his location. Ignoring how creepy that sounded, Ray didn't even remember he said something like that. Must be a bullshit excuse I came up with to explain away my absence back then. He shrugged off the thought and collapsed on his bed, feeling its soft embrace while closing his eyes. Taking deep breaths, he made a comfortable smile. Alicia. Unfortunately, the smile did not last for too long. The moment he uttered that name, a slight darkness clouded his face. We talked about a lot today, mostly books and all the drama I missed while I was away. Since Ray had to play the fool, she had to tell him all about the Royal Dungeon incident, at least, what she heard from what everyone was saying. It was thanks to her account that he was able to gain a lot more perspective on the situation of Adonis' team before he rescued them. According to the gist, they were only there for a couple of hours, yet it seemed they had spent all day in the dungeon. I knew it. Time moves faster in the 99th floor. He had beamed at himself at the time. The most important thing to note was their struggle against the dragon, especially Adonis' fight. He had to admit, the hero was strong. However, now that Ray understood the entire gist, he now knew for sure. Adonis wasn't stronger than him. It seems I've finally surpassed Adonis. But, it's not like I feel satisfied or anything. All things considered, Ray was able to get the complete gist of the situation. He was glad he came at the time that he did. If that wasn't the case, everyone else could have died. I have a skill that can heal practically anything and cure all ailments. But I can't cure death. Once a person died, that was the end of it. Still, despite all of these heavy thoughts, none of them were the cause of Ray's disturbed expression. No. This stemmed from something else. She didn't mention anything about the kidnapping. Not even a single detail. He and Alicia had talked about a multitude of topics, but any time he tried to bring her to the issue of her kidnapping, she constantly deflected. After trying it 2 to 3 times, she straight up told him she didn't want to talk about it. Once Ray heard that, he completely backed off. I mean, I was there. I know everything that happened, and I know the story that led to it. But Ray sighed as he blinked rapidly. He couldn't keep his sight steady with so many worrying thoughts swirling in his mind. I'm no good in situations like this. I just hope she's fine. Ray couldn't force her to talk about it. He only hoped that once she was ready, she would tell him and they could sort things out together. He didn't know when and how it all happened, but at this point, Ray already considered Alicia an important part of his life. He also hoped that was how she saw him too. I don't want to make her uneasy, so I'll back off. We can still have fun like usual. Once he resolved that in his thoughts, his mind moved on to other things. Now that we're only 9, I thought we would have some sort of meeting together. Adonis would have organized everything too. From what Ray could see, though, Adonis appeared very distracted. It seemed like he was constantly thinking about a lot. I would like to ask him, but nah. He and Adonis weren't particularly close, and he didn't want to cross the boundaries they had already established around each other. The whole situation must just have him rattled, that's all. Despite how powerful and idealistic Adonis was, he was still only a teenager. It was natural to feel these things. Right now, I should perhaps be more concerned about keeping an eye on Billy to make sure he doesn't do anything stupid again. From the little Ray observed, Billy didn't seem like he would do anything, but he couldn't be too sure. I can't get complacent about him. Not again. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Do you think Billy has changed his ways? Or is he planning something else? Chapter 188, Practical Objectives. Once Ray settled all the floating thoughts in his mind, he pulled out a crumpled envelope from his pocket. It was the letter that Noah gave him since the start of the day. I still haven't read it. Ray tore through the envelope and brought out the white sheet that was trapped inside. He was still on his bed when he turned to lie on his belly, placing the paper in front of him so he could read its contents. Dear Ray. What am I saying? How do I even put this? I just wanted to let you know that I've made up my mind about all of this. After seeing that dragon yesterday, I realized that I just can't cope with this. I want to live a normal life, no matter what. Sorry, my thoughts and words are all jumbled up. My hand still trembles whenever I remember the entire thing that went down. As much as I want to tell myself that I can get stronger to face the dragons, I know myself. I'm not cut out for this stuff. So, I think I'll leave and go to a quiet city where I can live a stable life. There doesn't yet seem to be a way to return home, so there's no use sticking around. If you do find a way to return to Earth, please don't gatekeep it. Come and find me, please see. I wish you well. You seem to fit in so well in this world that I find it almost absurd. Hopefully, you survive till the very end. I'll be rooting for you in my warm mansion. Your loyal subordinate, Noah. This guy. He remained an idiot until the very end. Ray found himself chuckling as he read the letter. Despite smiling at the silly thing in front of him, he felt a deep pain in his chest. It didn't come from any kind of external damage, and Ray didn't think he was physically hurt. He just felt strangely pained by the whole thing. To Ray, it felt just like losing his close friend all over again. I'll miss you, buddy. He wasn't too worried about Noah, considering the fact that he was relatively on the stronger side compared to the people of this world. He also has hundreds of platinum coins, so he should be able to live a fairly comfortable life. Ray also knew how Noah had matured in both business and general perspective as a whole. He was sure the boy wouldn't get so easily swindled. Or maybe he will. How can I know? Ray crumpled the note along with the envelope and threw it towards the bin that sat at an inconspicuous corner in the room. The crumpled paper perfectly landed inside the bin, causing the boy to leak out a stifled smile. Hee hee. Despite his own maturity, he couldn't escape the thrill any teenager would feel when they got their aim perfectly right. He sat up from his bed and sighed, feeling the pleasant emotion evaporating in no time. I just can't forget it, that face. The grinning face of the mastermind, as he turned and smiled in Ray's direction. He troubles me. Adrian Chase was the mastermind, but Ray knew absolutely nothing about him. The boy stood out even less than he did. There's no way to track him down now, so I can only hope he doesn't cause any more havoc. At the very least, Ray hoped he wouldn't have anything more to do with Adrian now that the boy was gone. However, something told him their eventual confrontation was inevitable. At least he's not evil. I should probably stop thinking about him and focus on the matters that are within my control. With that thought, Ray exhaled deeply and considered the two most important things he had to do at the current moment. First is to go and see the half-elf. He had abandoned her at the Carrie Blanc Group's building, but since he didn't think she was in any danger, he hadn't been in a rush to get her back. After all, where exactly would he put her? I'll just trust that Alderd and everyone over there have been taking good care of her. Ray initially wanted to go see her during the day, or maybe in the night, but he and Alicia spent so much time together that he lost track of time. I'll have to see her tomorrow, then. The second thing that he had to do, which he planned on starting now, involved himself. Status window. Name Ray Schuyler. Race human. Class anomaly. Level 99. Life force, 72. Mana level, 189. Combat ability, 130. Stat points, 0. Skills. Alignment neutral good. You are an irregularity to the world. Achieving the unbelievable, shaking the balance of reality. You seek to overturn what is and isn't. Will you succeed? Or will your failure be miserable? I've grown relatively stronger, but without relying on items, my base and bonus stats are still quite low. After facing the Dragon Commander Ja'ard, Ray realized just how low his stats were. If it wasn't for the combination of all his skills, he would have lost terribly. Speaking of skills, that was precisely why he had opened his status window. Doppel, display all skills. Responding to his command, a system panel popped up, revealing his skills. All 76 of them. My goal is to use and combine my skills, especially the lower tier skills, together so they can be more effective. Ray somewhat regretted letting go of some of his older skills, since they could have been used as growth fodder now, but it was too late for that. He couldn't have foreseen this sort of development. If I combine the lower tier skills, and all the skills that have very high compatibility, I can free up space in my arsenal. Having too many skills to call on was also too bothersome for Ray, so he preferred keeping things compact if he could. I'll also need to restructure the categories I placed earlier, he noted to himself as he looked at all the skills displayed before him. It was going to be quite the chore, but Ray was determined to see things through to the end. All right. Let's begin. AHH. Finally done. It took Ray over 2 hours to complete what he set out to do. He hadn't expected it to take so long, and the tired expression on his face was enough proof of that. Unfortunately for him, there was one major factor he never factored in when he considered the time he would dedicate towards merging his skills. Depending on the quality of the skills being merged, and the skill that would be born, it could range between a minute to nearly 20. He also had to carefully pick what skills to merge with what others' skills, which ended up taking additional minutes. As a result, a lot of time ended up passing by in the blink of an eye. At least, it ended up being productive. Ray smiled as he looked at the system panel before him. Perfect. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Apologies for the slow pace. The beginning always has to be like this to set things up. Chapter 189, Return to the Carrie Blanc Group. SS Tier, 3. S Tier, 8. A Tier, 8. B Tier, 12. C Tier, 3. Nil. Ray smiled as he looked at his new sets of categories. The whole attack, defense, buff, and auxiliary thing just doesn't cut it anymore. Some of his skills had overlaps with these categories, so he felt it would be too confusing to place them in a single box when they checked multiple ones. Right now, I have 34 skills, 27 of them are active and 7 are passive. He had also managed to increase the number of his higher tier skills while having a reduced amount of lower tier skills. It's better to have fewer skills that are more effective than a bunch of trash skills. To Ray, quality far outweighed quantity. In the fight against the dragon, he had seen this exact philosophy being the perfect position to have. Back then, Ray had to either abandon or jointly use all his low-tier skills to even think of damaging the thing. It went to show how ineffective they would be against powerful foes. Now that I have, this arrangement is the best. Once he finally settled on the thought, Ray could feel his body nearing its limits. Fwaya! He yawned while stretching his arms. It's 3 a.m., and I'm still awake. Damn it. Thankfully there wasn't training for the time being. He couldn't imagine the suffering he would have to endure if that was the case. I'll still have to wake up early, though. He had to go to the Carrie Blanc group to figure out what to do with the half-elf, after all. With that thought in mind, Ray collapsed on his bed and enjoyed a nice sleep. A dark-cloaked man stepped out of a swirling rupture in space, his form the very personification of mysterious strength. The purplish-blue portal behind the man collapsed the moment he appeared, causing space to return to normal. He appeared at the doorstep of the Carrie Blanc Group's massive building, his presence oozing nothing short of intimidation. The guards who saw him instantly bowed and parted ways for him to enter. Once he got in, he was welcomed by the staff, and he was escorted by an especially beautiful lady who donned the Carrie Blanc Group's uniform. She smiled sweetly at him, maintaining a few inches behind him, while making sure she walked as gracefully and respectfully as she could. Everyone in this building knew just how important he was, and any single mistake made could result in severe consequences. They ascended the stairs that led to the first floor, and after passing the grand hallway, they arrived at the exquisite lounge prepared for his exclusive use. For Sir Relix, he deserved at least this much. "You can leave now," the man in black told his attendant, and she bowed her head and exited the room after opening the door for him. As she left, he walked in, his mask hiding any vestige of emotion. HAAA. Ray entered the freshly scented place, feeling the cool and comfortable ambience of the place. He had forgotten all about the amazing reception he always got from the Carrie Blanc group. Perhaps that was due to the fact that he watched as they mercilessly murdered their enemies. He knew they were a savage bunch and didn't trust them in the slightest. To be honest, the only reason he was here apart from getting the half-elf was that he wanted to sell his new set of monster cores. If I can make money from them, and get new items, that would be nice. It wasn't like he needed money at the moment, but Ray had a feeling he would be relying on it in the future. Besides, there wasn't really anything like having too much money. Right? Well, it's not a compulsory arrangement. I'll just have to wait and see how this whole thing goes. The primary goal remained ensuring the half-elf's safety and also figuring out what to do about her. Ah! He's here. Ray maintained his sitting posture as he heard a slight knock on the door before it creaked open. Appearing inside the room was the slick and absolutely stunning broker Alderd Winsley. He was wearing his dark waistcoat, as usual, with his formal shirt and black trousers. His tie was expertly done, and while both his hand sleeves were folded up, it didn't subtract from his neat appearance. Alderd appeared to be nothing short of a gentleman. However, Ray couldn't be fooled by the man's gentle appearance and nice facade. He knew full well what kind of man Alderd really was. A killer. Ray fought back a gulp as Alderd smiled at him with a genuine look of relief and pleasant surprise. "Sir Relix, it's so nice to see you. I apologize for coming late, I just had to arrange a couple of things first before arriving." As soon as Alderd said this, he sat down and gave Ray the most innocent smile anyone can make. "I'm so happy to see you are well." Ray quickly glanced away due to how uncomfortable Alderd's smile made him. That was when he noticed something. Someone is still behind the door. He slowly tightened his neck with interest. As soon as he thought that, Alderd's voice burst forth. Sorry about that, Sir Relix. I assumed she would enter after I came in. He must have noticed that I detected someone behind the door. Also, she. As Ray was having this go on in his head, Alderd spoke up. "Please come in, Miss Sir Relix is waiting for you." After he said this, there was no response from behind the door. And then, a few seconds later, creak. The door slowly opened. Pale white hands held the knob as a girl entered the room. The moment Ray saw her, his eyes widened, nearly bulged. Beneath his mask. That is. He couldn't believe what he was seeing with his own two eyes. It's her. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I wonder what had Ray so flustered. In any case, I guess I'm sort of excited about the whole half-elf girl coming into play. Maybe she could pose a challenge to Alicia. Chapter 190, A Mortifying Misunderstanding. An angel. That was the best way to describe the person he was currently looking at. She had long black hair that sharply contrasted her pale skin. Her blue eyes looked like the ocean, or maybe the most precious kind of sapphire. She wore a black gown that was decorated with traces of blue embroidery. A precious necklace hung around her neck, gleaming with colors that matched her gem-like eyes. She looked absolutely majestic as she walked closer, though her aloof face made her seem more like a sculpted statue than a kind presence. It's her? There's no way. She's gorgeous. Ray could barely recognize the girl as the half-elf he had saved the other day. Sure, they shared certain features, but this girl was beautiful, too beautiful. She was the prettiest person he had ever seen. I think only Seraph is prettier. What the hell? As her beauty captivated him, Ray felt increasingly grateful for the mask he had on his face. He was certain he was currently gawking at her like an idiot. After taking a few steps away from the closed door, the pretty maiden stopped dead in her tracks and looked just like a statue. She said nothing, made no gestures, and Ray didn't even see her blink. She just stood there. She hasn't uttered a single word since she woke up. I don't know why, but perhaps you do, Sir Relix. As Alderd's words broke the silence, Ray found himself gently nodding his head. He was too deep in thought to reply. Didn't she have short hair when I saw her? She's grown her hair out already. And what's with the quality of that skin? Even though he healed her back then, she was still dirty. He wasn't able to see past all the grime. But now, she looked like a brand new person. Looks like it was the right call to bring her here. These people really took care of her. Ray slowly removed his gaze from the beauty. It was hard, but his willpower was enough to save him from her entrapping gaze. Sorry for abruptly placing her under your care without informing you. You did an excellent job taking care of her. Haha. What are you saying? This much is nothing, Sir Relix. As expected, Alderd tried to be as generous to him as possible. While Ray appreciated the gesture, he knew he had to press on even further. I'm serious. How can I compensate you for your troubles? In response to Ray's question, it seemed Alderd wanted to say something. However, he quickly decided against it and shook his head. There's no need for compensation, Sir Relix. Our relationship runs a lot deeper for you this small gesture to warrant compensation. The moment Ray heard this, he sighed internally. He knew there was something the man was hiding, but it wasn't like he could force Alderd to speak his mind. Very well then. He gave one more glance at the statue-like girl a short distance from him, and suddenly doubts began to echo in his mind. She really looks so still. Is she even alive? Hold on. In the end, he had to resort to name Asm. Race half-elf. Class commoner. Level 1. Life force, 100/100. Monolevel, 200/200. Combat ability, 3. Stat points, 0. Skills. Skills. Alignment neutral good. A genius due to her superior elf bloodline, but has been limited by her human genes and her unfortunate circumstances. She is profoundly grateful towards you, but still very troubled and requires your assistance. Help her. Ah. So her name is Esm. It seemed like she had made a perfect recovery. Still, the fact that the system was still insisting on him helping her made Ray slightly on edge. Well, as long as it's not detrimental to me, then I'll try. At the very least, I've confirmed that it's actually her. He still couldn't get over how crazy her stats were. Even though otherworlders were meant to be much stronger than the denizens of this world, he doubted any of his classmates had the kind of stats this girl had at just level 1. Her potential was too much. Sir Relix. Ray's gaze shifted to Alderd, who was smiling at him. I must have missed what he said. Right now, his thoughts were a mess. However, he quickly pulled himself together by taking a couple of deep breaths. I wonder. Ray narrowed his gaze on the broker and activated. Name Asher Blanc. Race human. Class air. Level 99. Life force, 30. Monolevel, 50/50ths. Combat ability, 21. Stat points, 0. Skills. Alignment lawful evil. Current heir to the Carrie Blanc group and the son of the Blanc counselor of the Obsidian Council. He is currently undercover as a broker as a part of his training. The only two people he respects are his father and Relix. Yet, Ray was surprised, to say the least, the moment he saw all that was displayed before him. First of all, the guy he knew as Alderd didn't exist. Not only was his name fake, but his entire identity was also not real. He's actually a big deal here. Ray knew he had no right to feel betrayed since he had also done the same hiding his real identity. Besides, it's not like he did it specifically for me or anything. It's training, huh? Ray could already figure out that Alderd, or rather, Asher, was being trained to inherit the criminal empire that he was born into. I better be more careful around him. There was one more surprising detail, though. Well, it wasn't really surprising for Ray since he noticed it when fighting Eval's radar too. Looking at the stat distribution, I think it's safe to conclude that they only get 1 stat point per level up. Even as a commoner, he usually received 3 stat points per level up. Compared to that, Asher's level and stats showed his allocation was lesser. It went to show that being an otherworld or even one with an F-tier class made him a formidable force. That was probably why no native in the royal estate really looked down on him. Given enough time, he was bound to surpass someone who was of an even higher level than him. I'm guessing his class isn't suited for combat, which is why there's no additional benefit in terms of bonus stats. Ray wondered what Asher's privileges were, but it only lasted a moment. He had to be wary of that he glossed over the first time he looked through the stats. He's lawful evil, I guess that means he had a code. Ray smiled in relief, especially since the system established that he was in Asher's good graces. I better respond to him now. After realizing he had been too deep in thought, Ray finally made his decision. Could you repeat what you just said? I didn't hear any of it. He decided to go down the honest path. I'm sorry. I should have spoken clearer. Alderd/Asher appeared flustered as soon as Ray made his statement. He's blaming himself? And it looks like he's being for real too. What Ray meant was that he wasn't paying any attention to Asher's words, but the latter must have taken it a different way. Well, as long as it's not detrimental to me, I should let him think whatever. Alderd then proceeded to repeat his words. I noticed your lover the miss wasn't he wearing the white amber, so I was just asking if something happened. The moment Ray heard this, he felt a slight tingle down his spine. It was probably just his imagination, but it felt like Esm's eyes twitched and she glanced at him. I told you already. She's not my lover. And yes, I needed the ring for something, so I borrowed it from her. Ray felt his heart racing as his hidden cheeks displayed shades of pink. Once again, he was grateful for his mask. Why'd you have to embarrass me like that, Asher? There was nothing more mortifying than being paired up with a beauty without consent. What was he supposed to say? Then I apologize for misunderstanding. Would you like us to make another white amber for the miss? Ray wanted to shout an outright no. The ring was meant for Alicia, and he never had any intentions of changing that. But what if this causes more complications in the future? Besides, Esm could maybe use something to keep her safe. The look on Asher's face showed that he was willing to do it as a favor, so Ray had to fold. Fine. In the end, he just had to give in. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Sorry if the entire drama is boring you. Please be patient and push through. Chapter 191, Alone Together. Alright, Sir Relix. I'll make sure we start working on it as fast as we can. The enthusiasm in Asher's face made Relix feel a bit guilty, but he swallowed it in. He's acting a bit too young now. I wonder if this is his real appearance. If Ray had to guess, then Asher seemed more like a younger man than someone in his 30s. He's in level 99, which is pretty impressive. I would think he was older, but that exclusive skill of his makes me think he levels up faster than others. Of course, Ray knew this was all arbitrary, so he didn't give it much thought. From the looks of his stats, it seems like he's stuck in level 99. Based on what he read in the Royal Library, humans had something called level caps. It meant that at a certain point, they couldn't get any stronger or smarter. They would reach a limit that was impossible to overcome, thus preventing the humans of H-Tray to grow beyond their limits. That's one of the reasons why people eventually rely on enchanted items and seek out more skills. These were ways in which people could improve their abilities without relying on levels and stats. But, there's a way to overcome the level cap. I'm sure he knows that too. Ray felt his smile widen. The solution was simple. A higher class. A commoner's level cap was usually level 30, and each tier of classes had their limits. From what he heard about Brutus and Luciel, they were both in level 150, so he had to guess that the limits of B-tier classes were at that point. C-tier classes seemed to have a cap of 100, or should I say 99? Pretty much, I guess. Unfortunately for the people of H-Tray, changing classes was a very difficult thing to do, especially past the C-tier. Ray was sure that even if the air class changed into Obsidian Counselor, it would still be a C-tier class. The effects would change, sure, but the class tier would remain the same. It was very rare for people have B-tier classes. But that's enough about Asher. I should get to the serious matters. Ray sighed silently as he glanced at the girl that stood at the corner. I'd like to have a private chat with her. Could you excuse us? Asher rose to his feet without question, nodding as he did so. Understood. I will be taking my leave now. True to his word, Asher left the couch and left the room in a jiffy, almost as if he was in a hurry even. Once he was gone, only Ray and Esm remained in the lounge. Well. This is a little awkward. Ray pulled himself together and decided to fully immerse himself in his Relix persona. You can sit down now. I've confirmed the seat won't harm you in any way. I've also cast sound magic, and taken other defensive measures to ensure you'll be safe, undetected, and unharmed. Ray said this mechanically, almost as if he too was an unfeeling machine. As he gazed at her, he maintained his posture. What will you do now? His thoughts trailed as a few seconds of silence passed. Much to his relief, she finally moved from her position and collapsed on the couch. Her body slightly bounced as she did so, and once again, her face twitched. Is it uncomfortable? Ray couldn't tell since her expression returned to the stoic kind in no time at all. I can't get a read on her at all. It felt like a chore to get through this, especially considering how she looked his age. I mean, Alicia is also a girl and I get along perfectly well with her. What's causing so much friction here? Ray seemed to be ignoring the fact that he was currently relaxed, and he had an imposing aura around him. The girl before him was also far prettier than Alicia, though her proportions were a bit lacking. If Trisha was on the high side, and Alicia was on the medium, well-proportioned side, then Esme the half-elf before him could be said to be on the low end. She wasn't flash as a washboard, but she also wasn't particularly endowed with the curves that his two female classmates had. Not that it diminished her beauty in any way. Ahem. In any case, I just want to tell you that I have no intentions of hurting you. You're safe here, I can assure you of that. Even though this was technically the black market, and the people here were cold-blooded killers, he could guarantee that no harm would come to her. Ray didn't know if that would be enough, and she could take his words for it. Fortunately for him, he didn't have to wonder for too long. I believe you. Her sonorous voice was like music to his ears, causing his tense body to relax. Her bright blue eyes glowed, and a small smile spread across her cute face. This was the first time he was seeing her smile, and his heart neatly skipped a beat, maybe 2 or 3. As she looks even prettier. Ray never thought that was even possible, but apparently it was. She's using her skill on me, huh? He laughed a little awkwardly, feeling a little too exposed as she did so. He practically felt naked. It's uncomfortable, but it can't be helped. If it helps her trust me, then okay. Besides, she already knows my identity, so. It wasn't like he didn't do the same to her anyway, so there was no use getting caught up in that. You're a good person. Her words shocked Ray as her melodious voice danced in the air. Ray felt his heart race as he looked at her smile once again, this time even brighter than before. As her moist lips opened to form even more words, Ray found his eyes focusing on them. To see such a strong, yet good person here. I'm relieved. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Don't come charging at me, okay? I know you are all still behind Alicia, but it is what it is. Chapter 192, Good and Evil. I couldn't speak to them because they were scary. Bad people. They were all bad people. As Ray heard Esme mutter those words, he began to understand a little more about her. She must have seen their alignments and noticed the evil attached. Ray wasn't so sure if alignments properly made a person good or bad. He remembered feeling frustrated after seeing that Billy had a good alignment, thinking it had to be a farce. But, in actuality, alignments were based on the personal values of an individual and how they interacted with the world around them. To Billy, his actions were good, but he did them in evil ways, which made him have the alignment. It was his own subjective definition of good mixed in with the actions of the opposite proportions. I think men like Asher know what kind of actions they engage in. Still, they indulge in it because it's the only path they can take or desire to take to get to their goals. For Asher and many members of the Carrie Blanc group, Ray assumed they operated on self-interest, and they would do anything to gain profit, as long as it was in accordance with their code. That's why I don't think there's any good or bad people here. Ray could never proclaim himself as a good person. And he could never completely label Asher as a bad person. In the end, they were just performing good or bad deeds using their own subjective motivations and interpretations to guide them. I can't tell her any of that, though. Ray sighed internally and nodded slowly at her words. I understand. He could only mutter. I trust you because you're neutral good. You also saved me, so. As her voice trailed, he found it gaze wandering. Is she worried about the other slaves? Once he had this thought, exude to comfort her a little. Don't worry. I saved everyone. They were taken to the royal estate, so they should all be with their families shortly. Ray knew life wasn't as simple as that, but for the sake of the innocent-looking girl in front of him, he had to make it seem so. That's a relief. Esme smiled, though her gaze still seemed distracted. That isn't it? Then why is she looking like that? Come to think of it, I know nothing about her. Even though the system said she was a half-elf, she looked pretty human to him. She didn't even have pointy ears or blonde hair that elves were known for. She just looked like a really, really pretty girl. Perhaps even a princess of some faraway kingdom or something. But her stats don't lie. She's definitely special. With that in mind, Ray proceeded with his question. Could you tell me your story? How did you end up where I found you? There were a bunch of things he was curious about, that was the first and foremost. I can at least get a glimpse into her background and figure out her origins. Maybe even learn more about elves? My story, huh? To be honest, it's nothing too special. As Esme spoke, her gaze seemed to be on something far away. Her emotionless face made it seem like a statue was speaking. I never knew my real parents. I was found and raised by the orphanage where I grew up. Many times, families would want to adopt me, but I refused each one. Why? Because they were bad. Esme nodded with some hidden enthusiasm the moment Ray asked the question. It felt a little endearing seeing her, with her stoic face, display so much energy. I told the orphanage of my gift, and I aided them in properly appraising anyone who wanted to adopt a child. I became indispensable to them, to the point that they finally agreed to let me remain there. Her small smile showed Ray that she indeed enjoyed her time in the orphanage. They were probably the only family she wanted. As such, it was a mutually beneficial arrangement for both sides. Once I became an adult, I took on more important roles in the orphanage and took care of the kids there. Most of the people I grew up with had gone, but a few of us remained. Esme went on to explain some mundane activities that they did in the orphanage and how it was managed. Ray thought she would go on forever, but he didn't stop her. He couldn't. I was happy then. The fond eyes she used to look into the distance, and the sweet smile that radiated from her face as she recollected the good times. Ray took all of them in. However, all of those were soon discarded as soon as she continued her story. A dark cloud came over her bright face, and her eyes darkened almost instantly. As she explained the horrors that came next, even Ray felt his chest tighten. Our town was pillaged by bandits. They called themselves members of the mercenary gang. Ray recognized the name. They were rumored to be the strongest force in the criminal underworld, and were often hired by top players including the Obsidian Council. Ray didn't think they would be mere pillagers. They slaughtered so many people before my very eyes. The men were mercilessly executed on the spot, and the women were violated. Ray could see Esme tremble as she shared the story. It seemed she was trying her hardest to control her emotions, and despite how pained she looked, not a single tear fell from her moist eyes. Her tone also seemed clear despite how many times it trailed. She was so hard to hold herself together. Should I do something? No. Ray decided to just watch. I really am no good at these things. I was separated from my friends as we tried to escape. Unfortunately for us, we were caught and taken as slaves just as all the viable young adults and children. Ray didn't know why he felt relieved that Esme didn't experience the violation that the other women encountered. She was plenty attractive, and any man would desire her body the moment they laid eyes on her. Despite all of this, she remained untouched. Ray could already guess why. They probably thought she looked too pure and didn't want to sully the goods. I can only imagine how much she was going to be sold for. Considering her looks, and the fact that Evalsredart could see the potential of the slaves he wanted to sell, it was probably going to be at an astronomical level. I remember thinking, why are they doing this? What did we do wrong? We were just living our simple lives when they chose to ruin our lives. As Esme spoke once again, Ray narrowed his eyes. If I had to guess, the mercenary gang was hired by Evals to obtain a whole bunch of slaves from their insignificant settlement while disguising it as a raid or pillage. It was done for profit, nothing more, nothing less. That was when I looked at their stats and found the true reason. It's because they're evil. Good people would never do such things. Ray didn't know what to tell her. He knew he personally wouldn't engage in such atrocities, but no one is truly innocent. Not even the good ones. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Hope you enjoyed the chapter. I hope to show you that this half-elf has layers and she isn't just the usual ice queen. Chapter 193, Good and Evil. Ray knew there were good people in the world. He considered Alicia a good person, and to an extent. He thought he wasn't too bad either. Perhaps he had a few gray areas in his life, but he knew for sure that people like Alicia would not stand for evil actions. Still, when push comes to shove, we sometimes have to make certain decisions that could be considered evil. There were quite a number of people in the world he came from who argued for the rights of animals, especially appealing to the fact that some were highly intelligent and sentient. This group of people proved that animals indeed felt emotions and pain, and in fact, were capable of feelings like love and attachment. They were highly complex beings. Yet, people killed them every day. They did so for various reasons like sustenance, enjoyment, or dietary requirements. Genuinely nice and downright pleasant people would consume the very animals that were said to be sentient. Ray didn't know which path was right or wrong. He only knew one thing. This is just the way life is. And so, as he looked at the girl before him, truly empathizing with her for the horrors she suffered, he couldn't help but feel a little numbness inside him. I don't think I would ever go that far with humans, but if intelligent monsters were happily living in their territory without bothering anyone, he wouldn't hesitate to kill them. His reason for doing so would be justifiably simple. EXP. Just as people consumed animals to survive, Ray didn't mind killing monsters to get stronger. It was unfair on the monsters who, if left alone, would have lived out their lives in relative peace. However, Ray didn't care. The same monsters would do the same under similar or certain circumstances. As he looked at the girl before him talking about good and bad people, he wondered what it would take for her to take a life or torture someone. It was a terrible thought to have, especially when looking at Esm's adorable face. But he couldn't help but wonder. I don't know what became of the others, but that's how I found myself in there. As Ray watched her stop talking, he realized he had to say something soon. You don't think they were among the batch of slaves I saved? No. She slowly shook her head. They took them to a different warehouse. I see. As Ray rubbed his chin, he felt a slight pinching sensation in his chest. If that's the case, it's probably already too late for them. They would have already been sold as slaves. Or, if Ray assumed that the schedule for their sale was the same as Esm's, then by capturing Eval's radar, it was possible that the sale was delayed. In that case, there was a chance they were still at the warehouse. I just have to get the addresses and connect the dots. Ray was sure he could just ask the Royal Council for the information they had gotten from Eval's, and it would be good to go. I don't even know why I am thinking of going so far for her. Maybe it's because of the system. What do you want now? He blurted out, staring straight into her eyes. For a few seconds, she kept quiet. It seemed like the question caught her off guard, so she was taking her time to properly articulate her thoughts. Then, I just want a proper home. To be with my family. She gave her response. Her family, huh? I'm guessing she means the orphanage members. Ray already suspected she would say such a thing, so he recognized that aiding her with this task would make the system satisfied. And then I should get whatever rewards are waiting for me once it's done. Don't get me wrong. The people here have treated me kindly, and they've done everything to make me comfortable. Even though I don't speak to them, they always seem to know exactly what I need. Ray felt a smile tugging at his lips as he imagined Asher ordering all of Esm's attendants to do their jobs perfectly. That guy. This place also looks amazing. I've never seen such luxury in all my life. But I don't feel comfortable here. Ray felt his smile build up as he saw her honest face speak to him without hints of fear or nervousness. Throughout their conversation, she hadn't shown even the slightest hint of intimidation. Is it because she's convinced I'm trustworthy? He mused. I feel uneasy here. I want to reunite with my friends and family that were separated from me. I want to rebuild that orphanage and live there with them. That is what I want. It was a simple task, not too ambitious. That doesn't mean it'll be easy. The tough part is finding her friends. Ray wasn't sure about finding all of them, but if he could get most of them, maybe half, then that would be fine. Maybe they would mourn the loss of the rest of their friends and move on. Unfortunately, don't think I can half-ass this. He had a feeling that unless Esm was satisfied, he wouldn't be successful. I'll just have to find all of them. Hopefully it won't be too much of a hassle. It wasn't like he was a cold-hearted monster or anything, but Ray had learned a long time ago never to be optimistic. He genuinely hoped he could find all her friends, but there was always the possibility of tragedy. And it would be dangerous if I set my hopes too high. I'll try my best to find them. The moment he said this, Esm's face brightened up. You just have to be a little patient, but I'll definitely try my best. I trust you. She smiled at him and nodded. For a few seconds, none of them said anything. They only stared into each other's eyes. Crimson. Reflecting azure. It felt as if the world held its breath as the two of them remained still. I should probably excuse myself. You want to continue your conversation with that man, don't you?
Yes, thank you.
Esme rose to her feet, bowing slightly to Ray, who kept his position.
Thank you for saving me, Ray.
And thank you for choosing to help me. Ray felt his heart skip a beat as she called him by name. He remembered the first time he saw her, as she called for him weakly. The girl back then was so different from the one who stood in front of him. I don't know why you are interacting with these people, but I trust and know you're a good person. Ray wanted to tell her she wasn't completely right, but he kept his mouth shut and watched her walk to the door.
Please be careful.
Don't be like them. Ray slowly nodded upon hearing those words. He didn't know an ominous feeling rose from within him, but he somehow felt her words went beyond mere advice. It was a warning. Esme gave him one more smile as she left the room, causing Ray to be only one there. He inhaled deeply and closed his eyes, thinking about everything that just happened. All he had just heard. And after mulling over them, only one word could come out of his mouth in a croaky whisper. Fuck. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Chapter 194, Meeting Rebel. A few seconds after Esme left, Ray felt the presence of two people approaching the door. One of them was clearly Asher, but the second was an unfamiliar force. He remained steady in his position while waiting for the doorknob to twist, and the man behind the door to reveal himself. And then... The both of them finally entered. Asher was the first to come in. He had his usual smiling demeanor about him, however, it seemed he was a bit uneasy. And it wasn't difficult to see why once the second man came in. A buff figure who could easily be 6 feet 10 inches in height walked in right behind Asher, his trimmed bearded face showing nothing but the direct contrast to Asher's smiling face. The man had an air of authority around him, and he reeked of danger. Even Ray, in his seat, could tell that this man was something else. Still, he hardly reacted as he watched the two men enter the room. Asher allowed the man to sit, while he stood behind his couch. Before the former could completely settle on his seat, however, Ray already resorted to the result. Name Rebel Blanc. Race human. Class merchant. Level 99. Life force, 10. Mana level, 41/41. Combat ability, 60. Stat points, 0. Skills. Alignment lawful evil. Head of the Carrie Blanc group, and one of the counselors in the Obsidian Council. AHH. Once Ray saw this, his entire outlook changed. I always suspected that this place had a wide array of connections, but even then. The Obsidian Council. Everything all made sense to him now. The Obsidian Council was said to be the governing force of the black market. They made the unwritten laws, and they ensured there was order in the commercial sphere of the criminal underworld. Apparently, they were also a part of some triumvirate, but Ray didn't have too many details about the entire structure. No one really did in this place. And now one of their counselors is seated right in front of me. Ray pondered on the reason, and he considered many possibilities as the man made himself comfortable on his seat. He was very buff, probably on par with the competitive bodybuilders back in Ray's original world. His height also made him appear more intimidating. He had rings on all his fingers, and unlike Asher, he wore a full-on suit. It made him appear both professional and dangerous. Ray couldn't say he disliked that. Sir Relix. I have heard so much about you. It's a pleasure to meet you. As Ray listened to the words of the man before him, he nodded slowly and watched from their distance. They were separated by the center table, and while they shared a considerable distance apart, the man's huge build almost made it seem like they were much closer than they actually were. Ray glanced at Asher, who stood like a statue with a smile on his face. "How do I go about this? Play dumb or just call them out for their BS?" Right now, it was clear that the two were trying some form of tactics to get some high ground when it came to bargaining. Or perhaps this was just how things were done in the black market and he had no idea. In the end, there was only one way he saw the current situation being tutored directly in his favor. And that was, "And I've also heard quite a bit about you, Cerebral Blanc." The moment Ray said this, the man's body and face froze up. Even Asher had an expression of shock written on his face. "Should I go a step further?" Ray smiled underneath the mask, enjoying how the entire atmosphere was changing. It's not often that a counselor appears in the open like this. "Am I right, Asher?" Ray darted his gaze to the flustered standing man who appeared even more flustered. He had a look of confusion on his face, even as his father looked at him from where he sat. The two exchanged quizzical looks, and Ray simply sat back and watched. "I'm sure I've disrupted everything they had in mind until now. Let's see how they'll take things from here." Even though they hadn't told him anything yet, Ray was already sure of one thing. They want something from me. It was most likely a favor, and considering how much the Carrie Blanc group had done for him, it would be a bit unfair for him not to come to their aid. "I'm sure that is what they want me to think." That was one of the reasons why he did what he did. At the very least, he would be able to prop himself up as someone who wasn't a pushover. That way, he wouldn't appear weak in the course of bargaining. "I don't want to be doing these people any favors, but I can't just walk out now." Esme was living here for free, and he still didn't have any other way to properly take care of her. Since he was also going to be very busy with the upcoming raid, it was better for her if she remained with the Blancs. Of course, he knew he'd have to be on good terms with them for that to happen. Hopefully, whatever negotiation that happens with them ends well. Ray swallowed his saliva and waited for the response of the older male who sat before him. "I guess there's no use hiding the truth from someone of your caliber." The man leaked out a smile and rose to his feet, his entire build seeming like an imposing mountain that would crash upon Ray's smaller build. As he watched him rise, Ray kept his normal position and simply raised his head to maintain eye contact. "You are right. My name is Cerebral Blanc, and I am a member of the Obsidian Council." Then, the man did the unthinkable. Cerebral bowed his head to Ray, absolutely shocking him to the very core. "Sir Relix, the entire Carrie Blanc group needs your help. Please hear me out. Asterisk. Asterisk. Asterisk." Thanks for reading. Chapter 195, The Current Imbalance. An uncomfortable silence hung in the air. The unnatural sight of a grown, massive man bowing to the much smaller man in darkness made the entire scenario all the more tense. No one could afford to speak in this heavy atmosphere, and for a few seconds, they could only watch each other. Then, "What's the use of a bow? I hope you do not intend on convincing me with cheap emotional appeals." As Ray said this, he felt the man's big build tremble a little. "Oh, of course not," Cerebral Blanc responded, a big smile on his face. He looked nothing like Asher, but it seemed like they both liked to smile in situations like this. Ray took a sip out of the tea that had been placed on the table since he arrived. The tea never got cold thanks to the enchanted cup that it was poured into, as such, Ray didn't need to gulp down the whole thing. Instead, He preferred to systematically take his time. This situation was no different. After taking a small sip of the sweet liquid, he cast his gaze on the two men before him. It seemed they were completely at his mercy. Sit down and get straight to the point. I prefer things being done that way. In response to his words, the Carrie Blanc boss actually obeyed very seamlessly. Wow. They must be really desperate. He decided not to comment on anything until they were done telling him whatever favor they desired of him. If it's something doable, then there's nothing stopping me from assisting them. From the looks on their faces, it seems like they'd be grateful for the help. Of course, Ray remembered his decision to stay away from the black market and criminal underworld as a whole. However, Esm was here, and he still had his uses for these people. Their relationship was a necessary evil. Very well, Sir Relix. I'll get straight to the point with you. Okay. Here it comes. Ray prepared himself for whatever big news would come. As you already know, the Royal Council has been the necessary aiding force in the black market and other facets of the criminal underworld. As Rebel started with this, Ray nodded. Though his thoughts played things differently. I still can't believe this actually happened. It seems like everyone knew about this except me. If the Royal Council hadn't said anything about their corrupt members, he would still be in the dark about the whole thing. Ray wondered how he would have reacted to the news if he heard it from Rebel's mouth first. Well, ever since their confirmed demise following the dragon invasion, the black market the criminal underworld has been in an imbalance. Ray's ears perked up the moment he heard this. He leaned closer, his shoulders arched as his legs were spread apart while maintaining eye contact with Rebel. The words that came out of his mouth were simple. Tell me more. You unbelievable. Ray couldn't believe all he had just heard. He never thought that so much lore could be behind the entire situation. Apparently, there was a body called the Underworld Triumvirate, and it consisted of the Black Market, the Slave Union, the Mercenary Gang. These three bodies were under the direct supervision of their benefactors, who also served as their overlords. These benefactors were the three deceased Royal Council. With them gone, a lot of changes quickly began to occur within the entire sphere hidden in darkness. Apparently, Scylla, one of the two remaining leaders of the slave trade, killed the second one and took over his entire territory. With so much power and influence, practically running a monopoly on slave trade, her influence skyrocketed. Rebel didn't know all of the details, but the woman managed to convince half of the Obsidian Council to support her uprising. She's practically taken over everything beyond the southern area of the underworld, Rebel had said. He also retorted that while the mercenary gang was a neutral party who merely provided muscle for the other factions, the lady in question now had a lot of their forces on her side. In essence, she was a force to be reckoned with. During the course of Rebel's exposition, he mentioned how the mercenary gang engaged in pillaging and providing security services to gain wealth. In a way, they were merely leeches who sold their strength to the highest bidder. Just glorified bandits, at least according to Ray. In any case, Scylla was making a grand uprising in the criminal underworld, and that proved detrimental to their business. Ray had multiple thoughts on the issue. To think I set this all off by accidentally causing the dragon to crush them. In a way, it was his responsibility. No. That wasn't right. It's their fault for meeting in secret anyway. Besides. Good riddance. He really couldn't see any reason to help the Carrie Blanc group on such matters. Wasn't this the way of the underworld? Was he missing something here? Sir Relix. I will reveal something to you that I have yet to tell any other person who isn't directly involved in the trade, but... Rebel appeared hesitant to share the information, but after a few seconds, his face tightened with hardened resolve. All those monster cores we got for you were used to make a lot of weapons and enchanted items. However, it was never for the use of humans. Once Ray heard this, his eyes twitched a little. Truly, he had given very little thought about what the Carrie Blanc group was up to with the items he made from what he sold to them. Now he was getting close to it. The only question was, if they weren't being sold to humans, who was their buyer? The elves to the east. They're our biggest buyers at the moment, and they're the ones we made so many items for. Yet, before Ray could complete his thoughts, Rebel revealed even more. Unfortunately, with the territories being under Scylla's control, we can't reach them at all. In essence, they were experiencing a crisis. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Yup. Seems like we're going to be seeing some interesting races in this arc. Chapter 196, The Current Imbalance. AAHH. I understand now. As Ray looked at Rebel and Asher, both of them having eyes that pleaded for myth, he had a considerable grasp of the situation. They invested a lot of capital on producing the items, but they can't deliver it to the elves in time. This meant they couldn't recoup the resources they poured into the production, which meant less liquid cash for them. However, that wasn't all. In business, punctuality is key. If they don't keep their end of the bargain soon, it's possible that the elves could go to another company, which would be bad for business for the Carrie Blanc group. Not only would they never recoup their profit, but it would take an extremely long time to dispose of the items in their stock. Ultimately, this was the major issue that was ensuing. The eastern continent is quite a long distance away. Do you know why the elves are interacting with humans now? Why are they seeking so many enchanted items in the first place? They didn't tell us. But I suspect it's because the war with the dragons has made them desperate. The moment Rebel said this, Ray nodded in agreement. That was his first guess too. Elves aren't technologically advanced and have no clue about industrialization. They are even often depicted as nature-loving entities who live apart from the corruption of beings like humans. To see that elves were going as far as dealing with Rebel, a black market leader, made him suspect that the difficulty had been cranked up in their domain. I suspect we are being intentionally sabotaged by the other 3 Obsidian Council members who joined Scylla's side. We've lost contact with the warehouse located in the east, and our packages delivered through any route outside the southern territories immediately become unaccounted for. If this continued, their loss would be unbearable. They're in quite the pickle. Ray thought to himself as he listened to Rebel go on. I can't say I blame them for being desperate. No matter how much capital a company has, profit is the lifeblood. And profit was gotten through sales. Ray doubted the Carrie Blanc group could make a lot of money just from exploiting the southern territories. A company whose scope of business was suddenly reduced to 1/3 of their usual commercial domain was bound to experience massive loss. Add that to the many items unaccounted for, and the whole elf situation. It was inevitable that the company would sink. So that's why they need my help. Ray could feel a small smile forming on his face. Even if he wanted the black market to collapse, there was no way he wanted Carrie Blanc to be the first to go down. This was the only place he had formed proper connections with. If they fall, the black market might still exist, but I lose all my current benefits. Ray could clearly see the appeal in helping Carrie Blanc. However, he also knew to be cautious. If I get caught up in a scheme that I do not understand, then it would be my total loss. Ray knew he wasn't very smart. He wasn't that great of a manipulator either. He was still very inexperienced and only knew very little about how the world worked. I could be getting used by the Carrie Blanc group for a much larger scheme. That wasn't how it seemed at the moment, but Ray knew he couldn't really trust the current circumstances alone. If he was to support them, he would be taking a risk. The worst part about all of this is that it had to happen now. Right when we were about to begin our expansion plan. As Ray heard this, he couldn't help but blurt out his next statement. Expansion. Rebel looked up and smiled a little sadly. Yes. We were planning on going more mainstream once we had enough capital. This might seem a bit strange coming from me, but the black market is a really terrible place. Ray was surprised to hear all of this indeed. He genuinely couldn't believe what Rebel was saying despite being one of the major beneficiaries, not the place. This place is dangerous and violent. It isn't a sustainable place to conduct business. Once Rebel revealed more about what he meant, Ray could understand the man's sentiments. Both from a logical and purely business perspective, it was much better to perpetuate trade in a more structured and orderly society. Black market trade was more profitable, sure, but it was also incredibly risky and highly volatile. Any mistake could cost you everything. We made a few auxiliary branches in mainstream to test out the market, and after a few years of doing our proper research, we were ready to fully transition. Then, this unfortunate incident had to occur. If they plan on moving to the mainstream, then it makes more sense to help them. Ray now had a second incentive for acting. However, I am curious about one thing. What is it, Sir Relix? As soon as Ray asked this, Rebel replied. It almost felt like the man was ready to be completely bare with him, making it difficult to distrust any of the things that were being said. Why do you not join Scylla's side? Rebel did not answer immediately, so Ray decided to elaborate. If you joined her side, I'm sure your business would be protected and all the harassment would stop. The other 3 Obsidian Council members probably figured this out a long time ago and folded. If Carrie Blanc did the same, surely things would end well for them. Scylla is known as a very selfish and cruel person. Even among the 3 leaders of the slave union, she was always said to be the most ruthless. She's unprincipled, and I would never be able to work with her. As Ray listened to this, he sensed arbitrary emotion taking over logic. He never expected such an experienced businessman like Rebel Blanc to have such a stance. Besides, I reckon it's a little too late for an alliance. Not only did I not get an invitation, but it's most likely that the 3 who joined her wish to get rid of me and the other 2 so they can have more territory and power. Ray could understand that. The fewer people there are in charge, the bigger the profit that goes around becomes. The 3 Obsidian counselors wanted their territory and profit to at least double, while Scylla wanted to rule everything. It made sense why the Carrie Blanc group was never going to be able to join their side. But why didn't he just say that from the get-go? Rebel had first of all displayed his emotional reasons before going into the logical domain. Ray only had one guess. He wants to show me that he's a man of emotion and sentiment, eh? Rebel Blanc was a man of principles and rules. It wasn't a surprise that both he and Asher had the same alignment. I like that. Ray grinned widely as he looked at the 2 of them. There's a lot that can benefit me here, especially in the elf department. I also want to have an actual company in the mainstream on my side. There's also the fact that they've helped me in the past. Finally, by helping them, I can stop the actions of the other criminals involved in this. There were probably other benefits he wasn't seeing at the moment, but Ray already had his mind made up. I'll join their side at least, for now. If things ever got awry, or the Carrie Blanc group acted suspiciously, he could always leave. Fine. Ray spoke, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. I'm in. Asterisk. 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 Chapter 197, Relix accepts. Rebel Blanc's heart was racing. As he stared at the man known as Relix, he felt a sensation he hadn't gotten in the longest time. Sheer intimidation. Rebel was genuinely anxious as he sat on his seat while staring at Relix. After the man had deciphered his identity after just one meeting, Rebel knew he was the real deal. How long has he known Alderd's real name? Since the very first day too? Damn it, I messed up. Those were his initial thoughts when he mulled over the meaning behind Relix stating both their names so casually. Now that he had calmed down, Rebel could tell that it was just a show of power. Thankfully, Relix wasn't offended that they had kept Asher's identity a secret. The reason he was currently was because he was waiting for Relix's answer. Right now, the Carrie Blanc group needed a miracle. He and his son had been strategizing different routes to take in their plans, but they always ended up coming up short due to their current lack of enough resources. If they were to turn the situation around, they needed help, a lot of it. Fine. I'm in. The moment Rebel heard those words from Relix's lips, his heart nearly skipped a beat. He knew he was a little emotional a short moment ago, but he couldn't help it. He had thought that it would turn the man off, but thankfully that wasn't the case. Thank you, Sir Relix. Once again, Rebel bowed. Asher, who stood beside him, also bowed as well. He hadn't spoken a single word since the start of the meeting, as was the customs of people of their standing. I trust you. Besides, since our relationship runs deep, there's no need to go as far as bowing, right? Rebel found his heart lighting up as soon as Relix said these words. Is he just saying this, or does he actually mean it? Rebel knew he would never have the answer to that. So he did the reasonable thing and chose not to doubt the only chance they had at survival. You are correct. Thank you, Sir Relix. This time, Rebel did not bow. Come up with a decent plan that involves me in it. Since I'll be in the equation, feel free to ask for the favors you require. As long as it's not dirty work, and it borrows my strength, then I will remain by your side. Those words sounded like music to Rebel's ears. You understood. I'll see you after a few days after making some preparations on my end. Relix slowly rose to his feet, and Rebel took this as his cue to stand as well. As for rewards, those can be discussed later. Once the job is done. Rebel found that absolutely fair if not downright charitable. Since the Carrie Blanc group was barely floating, this wasn't the time to splurge their resources. Though, even if he asked for a reward now, I'd probably give him everything I can. Then. I look forward to working with you, Sir Relix. Rebel moved closer and stretched out his hand towards Relix. He had a warm smile on his face, reflecting the current state of his heart. It was contrasted by the ominously dark mask that Relix donned. He honestly looked like a demon, with his crimson eyes and kale-like hooded cape. As they shook hands, Rebel felt relieved that the deal was sealed. Even it appeared to be nothing short of a deal with the devil. Then, I'll be taking my leave. A distortion of space surrounded Relix, and just as he dislodged his hand from the man's grasp, he vanished from sight. Not even a trance of his presence was left. HAAA. HAAA. Asher was the first to let out heavy breaths as soon as the man left the room. Beads of sweat were already falling down his face as he nervously approached his father. "We did it, boy." He and Asher hugged, the latter squeaking a little thanks to being squeezed by his giant father. "Time out. Time out, father." His father didn't listen, carrying Asher up as if the boy was still a kid. It felt awkward, a man in his early 30s being carried by another who seemed to be in his 40s. However, Rebel didn't care. He was laughing, smiling intensely as he expressed genuine joy that he, his son, and his empire, would not have to crumble. "Father, you'll interfere with the item too much." As Asher said this, it was already too late for him. The current 30-or-so-year-old man began to fade away under the grasp of his father. It felt like a mist was being cleared, and a soft whooshing sound of wind enveloped the man known as Alderd as he reverted to his original form. The first thing that was displayed was his gray hair and sparkling green eyes. He had clear skin, and a perfectly handsome face. Some would say he looked more attractive than his previous form, or perhaps cuter was the word. In any case, these weren't the only things that changed. His height was also different. He looked much smaller than his purported age would make anyone believe. What this boy appeared to be was a teenager. Probably one who was just venturing into prime adulthood. And the reason for that was simple. Asher Blanc was actually a young man who was 19 years old. The only reason he took up such an aged disguise was so he could look mature and capable in his job. As Alderd, he needed to rack up as many accomplishments and build up a good repute enough to win everyone's respect and loyalty. But now, alone with his father, he showed his true colors. "We should probably get started on making the preparations." "Yeah. We should." As the father and son duo ceased play and focused on business, their faces were filled with nothing short of determination. They only hope things won't worsen before the preparations are complete. "We're counting on you. Sir Relix. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Chapter 198, The Dungeon Raid Discourse. HAAA. As Ray lay on his bed, he heaved a heavy sigh and went through everything that had just happened. It was hard to believe that after everything, it was still morning. Things got a lot more complicated than I expected. The whole thing with Esm was one thing, and now the Carrie Blanc group was another. I also have to handle the raid. With all of these factors culminating in his mind, Ray began to wonder if he wasn't doing too much at once. However, he quickly tried to defend his actions. The Carrie Blanc situation and the Esm matter aren't totally unrelated. There are overlaps. In the process of taking down the cancer that was the criminal underworld, he could look for her friends and help them. Besides, the main enemy was a slave trader who had killed and consumed the territories of her competitor. There's the possibility that she already took over Redart's domain. If that happened, then the chances of the slaves being sold already was an option. Or maybe their sale has been postponed. With the way the market was a bit unstable, it was probably better to wait things out and not take too many financial risks. Since that was the crux of the matter, he didn't think doing both was going to be an issue. The problem is how to balance raiding with them. The raid was his initial commitment, and since he needed the Otherworlders to grow very strong, it had the most priority. There was no way he could put that on the back burner. I just have to find a way to make it work. Ray looked around his room and realized it was a bit messy. He sighed a little as he took his eyes away and continued his line of thought. I can do the raid stuff in the morning, and do the Carrie Blanc stuff at night. It was at times like this that Ray wished he had a cloning skill. Unfortunately, Life wasn't as simple as that. I can use to fool everyone that Relix and Ray are present at the same time, but that only works if I'm close to my targets. Was a new skill he got after combining, and a few other neurological skills. If allowed him to manifest anything that would look and even feel real. However, it would all be a mere illusion he made. It'll be very useful in the raid since I have to make sure I'm present as two people. As for his engagement with Carrie Blanc, he would just have to alternate between responsibilities. Thankfully, he had spatial magic now. It sucks that I can't sell all those 99th floor monster cores yet. Ray grumbled within himself before grunting a little. Sales had to be put on hold for now. I'll have to go and investigate the Royal Dungeon in my spare time to make sure there's nothing too crazy down there. He could also prepare a proper schedule and navigate the most optimal path for them to take so that the whole thing could be smooth sailing. For him, not them. They'll have to work very hard, I'm sure. Grinding for levels could be fun, but it was also a chore. In the end, though, they would see the rewards. I should probably get ready to head to the library. There was a bunch of stuff he had to catch up on both concerning business and monsters. As Relix, the mysterious and incredible adventurer, he couldn't be caught lacking. Let's do this. The days passed in the blink of an eye, and the two members of the Royal Council were currently seated in a massive lounge. Even Adonis was present. Even though he initially wanted to stand, he was convinced to sit with the members of the Royal Council. All three of them were faced by a single man who watched them in silence. He was Relix, the Dark Adventurer. Just as agreed, they were to meet and discuss the future of the United Human Alliance, particularly regarding the raid that was to take place soon. He had no entourage with him as expected, but even the Royal Council and Adonis had no guards. Luciel and Brutus had returned to the battlefield, and all the competent soldiers had been drafted with them, or were busy with other responsibilities. Frankly speaking, they were pretty understaffed. However, they hoped Relix wouldn't see it that way. Instead, this was meant to look like a kind gesture to show how comfortable they were with him. Since he didn't comment on that at all, they could only hope that he got the message. Before we start this meeting, I just want to say a big thank you to you, Sir Relix. Adonis swiftly spoke up just a second before Conrad was about to part his lips. I never got to thank you back then. When you saved me and my friends. Adonis was referring to the Royal Dungeon incident. Back then, he was too stunned and injured to mutter proper words of thanks. Everything happened too fast, and before he knew it, the man called Relix had vanished. No, that wasn't quite right. He and his friends had vanished away from him, away from the dungeon and into the royal estate. The next he saw of him was from a distance, where he saw how he easily handled the dragon in its true form and dealt with it with relative ease. And now, here he was, Relix himself, right in front of Adonis. He had to air out his thoughts. It was no problem. I was only doing what I had to do. You did well holding out for that long, though. As Adonis heard this, something about his previously bright expression changed. It darkened a little as he whispered. No. I really didn't do anything. His voice was barely audible, so it was difficult to even get a grasp of what he said. Eventually, Adonis' gratitude was shoved into the background, and the pertinent issue rose to the surface. About the Royal Dungeon raid. Conrad said with a smile on his face. His face was oozing with resolve, same as Vita's. Please take charge of it. We will accept all your conditions. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Chapter 199, The Dungeon Raid Discourse. Understood. Once the Royal Council made their intentions clear from the start, everything else flowed seamlessly. Relix began the briefing as curtly as he could, and everyone fell silent and listened. I spent the last few days exploring the dungeon in order to understand what path to take and how long the entire raid will last. The curious eyes of his audience were enough to do the asking for them. It'll take several weeks. Probably 2 to 3 months. Taking into account the time needed for rest, journeying, and the overall clearing of the floors including mining, it would take approximately 3 months. Of course, that period could dwindle or increase, depending on how capable the team I'm leading is. I have no doubt they'll be formidable, though, considering the fact that they held their own against a dragon commander. The Royal Council members and Adonis gave Relix their smiles, but it was still obvious that they had some troubled thoughts. It seems there is an issue. You can mention what it is. And no, it's not really an issue that has to do with your plan or anything. It's just. Conrad retorted quickly. His flustered expression made it obvious that he genuinely did not want to offend their benefactor. We need the resources in the 99th floor as soon as possible. In Conrad's place, Vita sharply spoke up. Unlike him, she showed no sign of nervousness. Instead, her face only showed worry. We're running out of our last reserves, and the resources in that floor are our lifesavers. Without them, things could get really bad for us. After she said this, there was silence. Everyone had their eyes on Relix, probably hoping for a solution from him. Thankfully, he did not fail to deliver. That is a simple matter. I can help you directly obtain the resources from the 99th floor. Really? You would do that for us? Conrad's eyes beamed shamelessly, as if he wasn't already expecting something from the dark adventurer. It was no use trying to act surprised at this point. Yes. Perhaps we should go to the site for a demonstration. Demonstra. Before anyone in the room could even react, a warbling surge of purplish-blue energy covered Relix and the 3 seated ones. Space warped, and they found themselves instantly transported to a place gleaming with crystal-like wonder. The very ground was made up of magic crystals, and the high ceilings had loads of them hanging above. From the walls, to the massive chunks that littered the ground, everything was monocrystals. Massive piles of monster cores also filled a particular section of the expanse, and at this point it was already clear what was happening. What this place was. Welcome to the 99th floor. Relix spoke up, his tone as calm as possible. The 2 Royal Council members appeared a little shaken, probably because this was their first time in a dungeon. Or maybe they just hadn't gone this deep into one. Adonis remained calm through it all, though he kept his gaze on Relix, who surprised him with that move. Not even he could sense anything before being transpired. How fast is he, really? His face seemed to say. I don't want to waste too much time, so let us begin quickly. Relix's echoing voice caused the trio to take their gazes away from the distractions and focus on him. The next thing he did was equally surprising. A bright blue light formed around Relix, with sparks of orange energy dancing around him. Multiple magic circles appeared a few inches from where he stood, and from their hidden depths emerged creatures. They leaked out heavy breaths as they appeared, massive monsters who had dark green skin, muscular bodies, and bald heads. The lights around them reflected on their naked bodies as they grunted. Summoning magic? You can use summoning magic too. The whispers from Adonis was the first human sound to emerge after the beasts appeared. The other 2 in the room were too stunned to speak. The hero stepped forward as he stared at the creatures in disbelief. These were ogres. How can he use high-level summoning magic? I thought he was focused on powerful offensive abilities. It was strange enough that he had spatial magic, which was rare, but adding summoning magic to the mix was just too absurd. Adonis couldn't believe what he was seeing. His thoughts were broken abruptly when he noticed the ogres moving. That was when he remembered something. Why Yuri summoning monsters? But if you're not a tamer, you can't control. Don't worry. As Relic's reassuring voice echoed, items began to manifest out of thin air in front of the monsters. First were shovels, then pickaxes, and then hammers. They're already under my control. They'll be the ones responsible for mining your resources. Adonis was stunned by what he was seeing. He wasn't the only one. Conrad and Vito were shocked to their bones, to the point that their eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. The man before them was amazing. I'll systematically open a portal so they can bring out whatever they've mined for the day. That way, you can quickly begin to process them. Everything was already so amazing beyond natural expectations. I understand you are understaffed. Perhaps they could help fill that void? 3 ogres were definitely formidable. Ogres were C-tier monsters, and a single one could do the job of 10 men, and so 3 of them could make up for 30. However, the kind of large-scale production and mining that they needed in order not to be in serious trouble far outweighed the current manpower being displayed before them. 3 ogres were plenty, but they're not enough. The moment the 3 audience members thought this, they were greeted with something that shattered those thoughts. Pshua. One after the other. Tsuya. More magic circles began to form. And from the circles emerged more ogres. Over a dozen. Over 100. 300 of them appeared before the circle stopped spitting out any more. As the group gawked in shock and wonder, Relic stepped forward and asked a question that made all their hearts jump. Will these be enough? Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Chapter 200, Finalization of Plans. Was a B-tier skill that Ray got thanks to his. He combined the effects of that he learned back when he and his classmates were training in the Colosseum. Back then, the summoners used, which was a C-tier skill albeit rare. The monsters they could summon at a time were weaker, and their numbers weren't too impressive. Then, a few days ago, when Lucielle and Brutus were leaving for the battlefield, she used to summon a giant flying creature that resembled a massive bird. Since Ray and his classmates saw them off, he was also able to mimic her skill. Afterward, he merged the both of them together to birth this new skill of his. He. Ray was grinning like an idiot under his mask as he stared at his enamored audience. They were all stunned beyond compare that he had summoned such a small army of C-tier monsters that it took all of his willpower to stop himself from bursting out in laughter. Even though this is pretty much my limit, I made it sound like I could casually do more. As Relix, his repute would only skyrocket after this incident, he was sure. Let's just hope they don't get too greedy and ask me to make more. Judging from their expression alone, Ray was convinced that they would do no such thing. 300 ogres were more than enough. His skill allowed him to achieve this much, but he had reached his summon limit. That was fine, though. As long as I can use my skill on them, they'll do everything I say even when I'm not around. Was a fusion of bells, and a bunch of other lower tier skills. It basically gave him a more heightened version of, and he could control his targets without them having to look into his eyes or hear his voice. The moment Ray summoned them, He had already placed them under his command by imbuing his mana into them. These grunts will slave away until they're done mining this place. The issue was what to do with them after they were done. I doubt they'll give me any meaningful EXP, but it's still better than nothing, I guess. Not only were these C-tier monsters, but they were summoned as well. Summoned monsters didn't have valuable monster cores, and they gave very little EXP. Even though these things looked strong, they were practically fodder to him. Maybe it'll be better to give them to Adonis so he can get stronger. Ray considered his options well. 300 was a considerable number, so it was bound to make the hero advance quite a bit. Well. He glanced at his awe-stricken audience, still maintaining his smile. I can decide that later. Right now, they still had to conclude their meeting. Let us return to the lounge. After Relix returned the three to their initial meeting point, the meeting was pretty much over. There was practically no need for further deliberations, especially after seeing all he could do. They were certain he could handle the situation with their otherworlders, and so they put their full trust on Relix and his decisions. Of course, they also made sure to tell him how amazed they were at his power, to which he responded, "It's not a big deal." Thinking logically about his words, he wasn't wrong. This was a man who had defeated a dragon commander before their very eyes. Compared to that feat, using a B-tier skill wasn't very compelling. Still, Relix's power could only make one more amazed the more he displayed facets of it. This reality caused everyone to have a single thought. Just how deep does his power run? No one could ever know. You can meet the raid team tomorrow, and we leave all the details to you, including when you want to begin the raid and the model you want to utilize. In the end, Relix had to make the final call when it came to who was qualified to come with him on the raid. He would test their performance and decide for himself. Agreed. He responded. Afterwards, both sides rose to their feet and the Dark Adventurer shook the hand of Grandmaster Conrad, Lady Vita, and Hero Adonis. They all exchanged goodwill, and afterwards, Relix vanished into the depths of his dark portal. No one knew where he went. HAAA. That went well. Ray plopped to his bed and smiled gleefully. He had pulled off things on his side so seamlessly, almost to the point that he was impressed with himself. It's a lot more difficult acting when you're in front of so many familiar faces. There were a lot of times that he wondered if they could see through his disguise. Fortunately, he was able to quickly dismiss it as paranoia. Despite all this, though, there was one thing that couldn't escape his mind. It was Adonis. I noticed it. He was acting a little off around me. Ray realized that Adonis probably felt too inadequate in the presence of Relix. After all, he was the one supposed to be the hero. But, if Adonis truly has the heart of a hero, then he should have no problems with me. As long as we can help the people here. That should be all that matters. He wasn't particularly interested in getting close to Adonis as Relix, but he hoped they could get along. Now that I've settled the whole arrangement with the raid, I can focus on the Carrie Blanc situation. He had spent his past few days wisely, so he was a bit more confident in his ability to comprehend and appropriately act in the dealings of the criminal underworld. I'm happy I get to use my discretion in this raid. It'll give me more flexibility to alternate between both sides. Leveling up in the Royal Dungeon raid, and helping out his business pals at the same time. I can't wait. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I honestly apologize for the slow pace. It's honestly my fault, as I like to get into the details of a story and that ends up taking space. Also, I'm happy we finally reached 200 chapters. Thank you all so much for sticking with this story for this long. I promise to do better.